Hello again, and welcome back to Broforce Broview. Today we are going to be taking a look at Imperator Furibrosa, a custom bro created by Alex Neargarter. Furibrosa is based off of Furiosa from the Mad Max series. Actually, I believe she just got her movie just a couple of months ago. So, let's go ahead and dig in. Starting off, she has a crossbow as her primary weapon. The crossbow shoots bolts, which fire in a straight line and can be used as platforms. You will also note that the bolts have a set distance before they fizzle out, but can be charged to shoot slightly further and with an explosive bang. I will note that you only have two stages of charge, either uncharged or fully charged. So even if you get 90% of the way there, no increase in damage. You also don't get a significant change in the range, as the explosive bolts actually explode just after they pass the fizzle point for the standard bolts. So it's not really a range increase, more of a damage and explosive force increase. Next up, we have a melee attack, where she does this cute little arm wiggle. Honestly, I'm going to hold this off until we get to the test portion where I demonstrate it, because it's just easier to demonstrate than to talk about. I will say, this is, I think, the best melee attack we've seen for a special or a custom bro. Now, her special is another big unique one. It is the War Rig. The War Rig is her personal mount, a vehicle that she summons in. It has some pretty good mobility. And as you can see, above your lives bar, you have a NOS bar. So similar to Tank Bro, she has the ability to go faster. It also has its own special, 3 charges of a cannon-fired ballista that is capable of penetrating the ground. Let's go ahead and get up here. And yeah. Now, these ballista bolts can be used as platforms, though they do a ton of digging. You're very rarely going to end up in situations like this below me, where there is steel in the world, as steel is generally only used to prevent you from breaking things like the flagpoles or zip lines. Now, normally I would wait till we receive get to the special portion of the test, but real quick, I'm just going to kind of run through a couple of things about the War Rig now, and then we'll have a bigger section near the end. So, the War Rig will come from behind you regardless of which direction you're facing. So, by strategically placing yourself, you can hit or dig depending on which way you want. You can also make the War Rig go further than your standing location by holding the button. Now, as we have a War Rig here, by summoning another War Rig, as you've noticed, it will explode. And an War Rig explosion will kill enemies, though be careful because it can also kill you. Another big thing to note is that the War Rig is only accessible to Furibrosa. Any other character that, like if you change characters by rescuing yourself or by being killed, the War Rig will explode, so you can't share the speed. Anyway, before we go into the test, you might be thinking here, hey, look, we have a very well-rounded bro. She's got a powerful crossbow, it has a charged attack, she has this special that's a very interesting vehicle with lots of utility, and we have this very secret melee attack that you're just not telling us. So Nose, tell us, what else is there to offer? Well, imaginary commenter, who definitely doesn't exist, there is one more thing. By double-clicking down, you can pull out a second primary weapon, the flare gun. Her flare gun is, as you can see, a medium to long range, though it does have a bit of a drop. If it hits walls, it will bounce. Now, some things to note about this flare gun are that the flares don't actually follow a single path. There's a handful of variable arcs of fire. Also, the arc of fire, the fizzle point, if the flare bounces off a wall before hitting the fizzle point, it will extend its lifespan slightly. But as you can see, the lifespan of the flare does depend, or does change slightly based on where you are and in its lifespan when it hits the wall. Now, with 2 primary weapons and a charged ability for one of those primary weapons, a little bit of a longer testing. So we're going to rush through this at a jogging pace, just so we can kind of get all of this done in a bite-sized video. So, let's go ahead and start off. Against mechs, the flare is actually very powerful. As you can see, 3 of them can take out a mech. It's almost as fast as just commandeering the thing. While crouched, a single, or just in general, a single flare will break a block. But while crouched, you'll notice that the firing, both the firing trajectory and the firing point do not change whether you are standing or crouched. It's a little harder to see with the flare because of the multiple potential trajectories, but that does mean that you're able to either fire from long range to hit blocks, or you can come up right on it. Against quick enemies, you do want to be careful. While the flare is relatively fast and capable of taking them out, larger groups can overwhelm you. Against medium enemies, the flare is enough to take them out in a single hit, and against large enemies, like this, the flare can also usually take them out in a single hit. I want to say about 3/4 of the time they die in a single hit. That being said, if they don't die, the amount of time they run around crying like little babies because they're on fire is roughly about as long as it takes for you to fire another flare at them. In large groups like this, you do need to be careful because the flare might not mature enough to cause an explosion if there's somebody right up on you. That being said, as long as you have enough room for the flare to fully, or the projectile to fully form, you can get this nice little runaway fire effect. Now do note that that fire won't generally kill a bunch of people, but it will scare them, putting them in a corner, allowing you to deal with them. Obviously at that point you're probably going to want to use the explosive bolt. It is just a better way to deal with that. Now normally I'd show off the special here, but we've kind of done that a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of show you some of the bouncing. So by bouncing, you are able to get a nice little bit of damage on these mooks. Now note that while the fire can hurt them, it generally won't. It will just fear them. So you end up in this situation where, against large groups of enemies like this, you can very easily... They're just going to set themselves on fire. I'm going to go ahead and just kill them all. So you can very easily end up in a situation where you've got a bunch of people all in the corner, and you just can't kill them fast enough. Another thing to note is that your flares do hit dead bodies, which we will see here in a moment. Against spotters, again, the fear effect from the flame will cause them to have a little bit of trouble reporting you, so you're usually pretty good at being able to take them out. Against shielded enemies, up close, the flare works really well. Well, in general, 2 hits are able to take them out, as you saw there. With some fancy shooting, you can sometimes get the flare to bounce and double hit. But the general way for shields is the first hit will do nothing, the second hit will throw their shield off and kill them, and the third hit will blow them up. Kind of like the zap from Stargate. You know, 1-shot stuns, 2-shot kills, 3 shots deletes. Against groups of enemies, the flame effect actually makes this kind of a really good fight against, or really good for fighting groups. But, as I just saw, you can hit a dead body, which can get in the way of you killing more people, and just generally can be a minor issue. Now, here's where we get to the secret. Furibrosa's melee is a shield grab. So you can grab hold of enemies and hold them up as a shield. Now do note that this doesn't always work. Sometimes the enemy can, if they're close enough, they can shoot through it, and the shields are only good for about 3 shots. That being said, you can change weapons, you can charge up your crossbow, and you can even summon your ult, or your special. So the shield, or the grabbed enemies, are a nice little thing to have around. Also, you can throw enemies after they've been grabbed, so you're not like stuck with them. And here we can see, if we get in, the enemy is released, but they run, and this seems to break their AI. Another thing to note is when they're on the ground, another punch will kill them. Now, when digging, as we've already seen, a single block will break, and there's a bit of, or there's no real uppage when crouching. However, there is a drop down. So, as you can see here, when you get a little bit of distance, your flare will not only bounce backwards, but will just arc downwards, giving you two abilities to dig down with a single weapon. And as I've discussed before, the ability to go down is a powerful tool in Broforce. Next up, we have the crossbow. Now, the basic crossbow just doesn't really do the damage that you would need to kill a mech, as you saw there. However, the charged crossbow will destroy the ground around them, instantly killing them. Against enemies like this in this situation, the crossbow is able to break ground in a single hit, and you'll notice that the crossbow doesn't change its point of fire or the fire trajectory depending on your position. So crouching or standing, you're fine. You'll also notice, though Mechs can stand on your platform created, because the fire trajectory stays the same, you actually will shoot into your own bolt, which will go underneath enemies that are standing on it. Against fast enemies, your bolt, while it isn't the fastest firing thing, can hit two enemies at the same time. Against medium enemies, it is a one-shot kill, and against larger enemies, it's a two-shotter. Against stacking enemies, it will grab two of them. It's a little hard to tell because there are just so many of them stacked up, but the ability to grab two of them, push them to the side, you're, killing two people with one stone. It's a really nice little ability here. Now, there's really no up or down here, so we're just going to ignore this group and move on. Now, against spotters, you can kill two enemies in a single shot. The problem is, in this situation, we had 4. So in groups of, or spotters, if there's 3 or more, you're going to want to be careful. But if there's 2 or less, boom and done. Against shields, you have this really nice little bouncing effect. We saw something similar to this with the Predator's javelins, where it seems that it's bouncing off of their shields, and as it turns around, it grabs the shield holder and takes them. Now, here, I'm not sure if they're alive or not. They kind of do this weird, leg thing. They might still be alive. So, just let's go ahead and get rid of them just to be safe. Against groups, as I've stated, it does grab 2 of them at a time. So, you do need to make sure that you're working, or the confines of what you're working. Now, as we go back to the digging portion, the standard bolt obviously digs straight. You don't have anything to worry about. When you're standing, it fires straight, and when you're crouched, it fires straight. Now, here's where we get something a little interesting. Now, you see, when you fire, it not only does it blow out the block you hit and the blocks above it, but it will also damage the block behind and below it, giving you the ability to dig downwards. Which, as we said literally seconds ago, is super powerful. Now, just so we're not going to repeat the digging section for the explosive crossbow, yeah, it's an explosive, it's the crossbow. It has all of the same features of the crossbow, except it also explodes. So it's a very powerful digging tool. Alright, and just to finish up, we've already demonstrated that you can take out with a single charge. Same here. A charge shot, it digs very powerfully. Nothing to worry about. Against enemies, you'll notice that the charge shot actually grabs a hold of the same two enemies, and you can guess that it's going to work wonders against all of these without any issue. I mean, the basic version works wonders. Now, against groups, you do want to be careful. In one of my earlier testing sessions, I really wish it would have been in one I was recording, but I actually ended up dropping the frame rate to less than 1 frame a second because I got all of the primevals in a single explosion. So you do need to be slightly aware of that. Against scouts, as long as you're pre-charged, you're good. The main problem with the charged bolt is it takes a second. Against shielded enemies, it's an explosion. It works wonders. With the small groups, it only grabs 2 of them, but if the wall they hit or the point of explosion is before or near enough, it will spread and the explosion can do, well, wonders. Now, just to kind of demonstrate another little bit of thing here, we're going to go ahead and summon our special. As you can see, this vehicle does get stuck if it hits the ceiling, but it is able to dig through dirt without much of an issue. And the special can be used to dig as well. And as I've already stated, you can stand on it using it as a platform. Alright, now we've come to a bit of a change of pace. This is a larger area that allows me to show off some specials of the war rig that I just couldn't show off in my confined testing area. So, just some key notes. You'll notice at the bottom, every 10 spaces I have placed a tire line. This is going to help you judge space. So, in the war rig, you are able to move much faster than your run speed. As you can see here, this is just a few seconds of moving at standard speed. And this is just a few seconds of dashing. Countering this, we have our standard run speed, or walking speed, followed by our run speed. Another thing that I wasn't really able to show well in my testing area is that the war rig has a window, allowing you to fire out the side of your window. You're able to charge up your crossbow, fire your crossbow, switch weapons, and fire in your flare. Because of this, you kind of have a lot of ability to dig down or to handle enemies while in the war rig without actually damaging your war rig or risking it getting hit. Another small thing that just you might have noticed in play is that the war rig really just doesn't care too much about like the size of gaps. As you can see, even when there's barely any ground, it actually takes a gap. This is actually the smallest gap that you can fall into, and that is 8. However, as you saw, we just kind of flew, like, just drove right over that. So at full speed, it's pretty common for you to go over a gap of 8. Sometimes you can make it over the 9, though when you dash, you almost always make it over the 9. Making me look bad. Okay, generally, you can make it over the 9 with a dash, and sometimes you can even make it over the 10. I've never been able to make it over 11, and as you can see, it kind of has a little bit of play to it. It really is dependent on how much, or just how much velocity and momentum you're able to build up. So as you can see here, we're going to go ahead and get to speed, and then we'll go ahead and use our dash over all these. As you can see, that time we made it over the 9, but not the 10. But anyway, because of that, you are able to drive through a lot of levels that don't seem like they would normally be able to be driven through, because you're able to kind of go over all of those gaps and holes that a bro would generally have to jump or parkour over. That being said, this is a custom bro, so I very well might have missed something or misjudged something. So if you think that there's something I've missed, something that I'm over-evaluating or undervaluing, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and have fun.